Hello, Shwai, and welcome to Radio YesCymru on your favourite podcast and also on the YesCymru YouTube channel. My name's Siôn Jobbins. I have two great guests this evening, Mark Hooper and Kiera Marshall. You know some of them, I'm sure that. Loads to talk about. Mark and Kiera, if you could just quickly say who you are, and then we'll have a chat at the end about how you ended up becoming rabid Welsh nationalists and supporting independence and naughty stuff like that. So I'll start with you, Mark, just quickly, who are you?
So I'm Mark. I've that story about how I got into independence is involved a long car ride, so I look forward to that one later. We've still got time. Last few years, I've been setting up Bank Cambria, which is our own community bank. I've started a new job today, bizarrely, working on for Community Energy Wales on trying to bring community energy more into our communities.
And you've also been a special advisor in the government as part of...
I don't talk about that very often, if I can help it.
Cars on your back, but it's worth people just to know this stuff. And then Kiera, of course, we know you stood in Cardiff West for Plaid, but just a few more words about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm the lead economy researcher for the Plaid Cymru Senedd group, and I used to also be deputy head of policy for the Federation of Small Businesses. It's my background sort of in economic policy, really.
And you're also a Swansea Jack. So you've got a Barry boy and a Swansea Jack, and then a Cardiff snob in the middle. So so lovely. Well, thanks both for coming on to Radio YesCymru, the world's favourite podcast. We'll kick off and we're going to discuss the viability of independence. I know, Mark, you always turn your nose up on this because you say, of course, it's viable and we can afford it. But we want to just dive into that. And Kiera, of course, you've got some expertise on this as well. Then I'd like to discuss, if people are so serious here on Radio YesCymru podcast, about independence, then basically we need a Plaid-led government after 2026 and how that happens and challenges to that. And yes, I think we need to discuss reform and stuff with that. And then I'd like to just be a bit nosy and find out who you are, because we're Welsh and that's the kind of questions we really like. So we'll kick off, Mark, because I got a few questions for you, because I'm not too sure some things. Is Wales economically viable? Can we afford independence, Mark Hooper?
So the answer is yes.
Right, good.
And the question's a rubbish question, I think.
I knew we'd see this, Kiera. I knew this would happen.
And this isn't me trying to cause trouble or spoiling your podcast and things like that, but it sends you down a route that is, we've been asked a question that just makes no sense. Every country is capable of independence. It's what you can deliver. And for me, it's about what you can make so the citizens of Wales, will they be in a better place in an independent Wales or part of the UK? And I think we know the answer to one of those, don't we? The answer to one of those as part of the UK is we have 30% child poverty. We have, communities that have just been ripped asunder over the past 50 or 60 years. So the answer to one is easy. Drakeford's insurance policy clearly isn't anything that delivers. So we know what that is. So then you start to question, well, what could we be if we were running the thing ourselves? And then I think it's the interesting thing is how do you start to build up policies that make things better? And sometimes, Siôn, I think we spend a bit too much, not you and I, but generally, we spend a bit too much effort talking about the economy as if it's this abstract, real world thing. The economy is essentially, in the way it's explained, is made up by economists, and it's what it should be describing is the society we want. Now, I want to live in a society where no child ever grows up in poverty. I want to live in a society where everyone's got access to a roof over their head. That's the sort of society. And then you build, I think, and this is the challenge for Plaid, for the independence movement. Tell me how you're going to do those things. That's the critical next stage.
Okay, stay there, Mark. We'll come on to stuff that you raised. Kiera, just again, the same question as I asked Mark. Is Wales economically viable? Can we afford independence? Or rather, yes, South Sudan is independent. It can afford independence, but I wouldn't want to live in South Sudan or Zimbabwe with hyperinflation. So Mark is right. Any country can afford independence, but would independence make Wales worse off than it is now? What's your view on that, Kiera?
Sort of as what Mark was saying, like we're talking about the viability of independence, but actually I don't think the current situation is viable. I grew up in a council estate in Town Hill in Swansea. The future is bleak there for people. There's no opportunities for young people, and that's in a very urban area. You get to rural areas and the situation's even more bleak there. And that's while being part of the UK. So for me, it does sort of give you that step in that direction. The UK is not viable, therefore if Wales can be independent, that is a route we need to look at, because this isn't working. Our transport network, for example, is dilapidated and dated. We suffer from historic underinvestment, and we're at the hands of Labour politicians who won't fight to do anything about that. They've got borrowing powers they won't use. They're not going to devolve the Crown estate to us, again, which would be sources of funding and investment. So I think the current situation is inviable and keeps us poor, whereas independence would actually allow us to build a financial situation that was more viable. And that's sort of how I look at it.
Okay, so those points are all good points. I agree with them, obviously. But the argument people say, okay, you were talking about is investment, improve transport infrastructure, improve schools, everything else. Where does that money come from? I mean, you could raise more taxes. And I remember being on Aberystwyth Town Council in the 1990s, and there was literally a discussion about raising a tax by 20 pence a month. I know taxpayers wouldn't like, I mean, even back then, 20 pence a month more wasn't a big issue, but politicians are careful to raise taxes, and people also, whatever they say, don't like paying more taxes. So, Mark, how do we get the investment, without, and in a way which people will actually vote for? So, I mean, it's all right to say, yeah, we can raise this money by so and so more taxes or whatever, but if people aren't going to vote for it ever, there's no point discussing it.
So we probably need a longer podcast than we're going to have tonight. But the starting point is, for a start, I wouldn't stick with the pound sterling as being our currency. I'd, as soon as we possibly could, and I start the work long before independence arrived, is to develop our own sovereign currency, because that gives you opportunities to be able to do things that the UK government could do. So Kiera's saying that the UK government isn't viable. That's a political read. The UK isn't viable because the politics of it. And we've got to deliver a different politics that delivers a different outcome. In the 30s, Keynes said, who's one of the preeminent economists, said, whatever you can do, you can afford. Now, what he's trying to say is that essentially a sovereign currency can't go bust. So when you talk about taxes paying for public services, what taxes do is actually cancel money, and then the government creates money all the time. So we have to stop thinking of the state's money in the same way as we think of a household budget. The person who made us think like that was Thatcher. She said, if it's not in my handbag, I can't spend the money. And we've just bought into that. We need to start thinking about things differently in terms of and we need to be a bit more serious about the economics of money, because then we start to create some opportunities, what you might do with a sovereign currency. Now, if we did go down that route, I think there's a couple of big risks. One is that there is a risk. You mentioned, I think, Zimbabwe and South Sudan and other places where you talk about hyperinflation. Primarily, and if you go back to what Keynes said, is that they did things they didn't have the resources to do, so they were competing with their money. So that brought inflation into the mix. But for goodness, let's start from this point on. Let's have a conversation about Welsh independence that isn't pretending that an economy needs to that a state, a sovereign currency can go bust, and we should treat it like a household budget. If there's one thing we could get away from, and this could be the starting point, that's the place I'd start. From then on, you then get into the policy choices.
Okay, just to keep with us quickly then. Sovereign currency, would people hold it? What happens, all these people who live in Wrexham, work in Chester or Liverpool, it's the same, or whatever, just people going,
yeah.
How does that work? So there's different rates. I can understand, okay, one side of the board, you've got different taxes. That's the same from Ceredigion and Powys, different council tax, so the bands I understand. But if someone's, and okay, I understand also people are usually paying with card, very cash is used, but that's also an issue. So how does that work then when you got your own currency? Because I mean, would the Welsh pound, for sake of argument, be pegged to with the pound sterling, or would it be free floating, or would it be hard enough for people to want to hold?
So the way to make a currency viable is the state needs to tax in that currency. So that's it. So if the state decides that corporation tax, income taxes are going to be taxed in the Welsh pint, I don't know, whatever we want to call it, then it will be used and taken, because people, to be able to live here, you'd need to be able to pay your taxes in that figure, in that currency. I think when you talk about the differences between states, I know they got the euro now, but you and I, Kiera's not, but you and I are old enough and ugly enough to remember when we had to go between France and Spain, and it was like one was a franc, the other one had a peseta. It was all different, and it just worked. These things work. I think the pegging of it, there will be a time where our economy is so closely linked to the English economy primarily, but also other parts of Europe and other parts of the UK as well. I think the islands, south and north of Ireland, we're clearly got some linkages to. So there will be some point, I think, where you may have to have some sort of a peg to sterling for a period of time, but that wouldn't be sustainable in the long term, because the thing that you and I think want to move away from is having our politics being decided by the country next door, and that's the control that they still be able to hold over us. So the longer that happens, the more the politics are being controlled by someone else, and more importantly, they're actually controlled by people we can't even kick out of office. The governor of the Bank of England, I don't vote him in, I don't vote him out. Currency traders, the spivs in the City of London, I can't get rid of them. To be fair to Liz Truss, I say this with a bit of tongue in cheek, but the people who should have kicked Liz Truss out of office shouldn't have been the city traders. They should have been the people of Britain at the time. They shouldn't have been. I find it weird that too many people in the Welsh independence movement think we could still stick with sterling. That's honestly, I think it's a recipe for disaster.
That's a sort of key point, isn't it? Are we really independent if our monetary policy is decided by a foreign government? Is that what we want independence to look like?
So I mean, it's okay. Thanks for coming in for this. I mean, is this something Plaid are looking at? As a way, we're not even close to an independence vote yet. Yeah. But we all know or believe that the currency issue was one of the things which tripped up the Scottish independence, which was just 10 years ago. And they seem to be now discussing more about Scottish currency and hardening that up, from what I understand. People can correct me. Is this something, well, first of all, do you agree with Mark, or do you think, actually, no, people won't hold the Welsh currency, and okay, it's nice to have the idea, but essentially we're still going to be so thoroughly tied to the UK in any case, we may as well just use their currency. After all, when I was in Kosovo last year, they're using euro. They're totally independent, not even part of the EU. So I mean, different states can hold different currencies as well.
Yeah, I did wonder whether, obviously Mark suggested some sort of transitionary period where the currency was pegged. My thinking was there'd be some sort of transitionary period where we sort of had an informal arrangement using the pound, where we build up sort of financial infrastructure in Wales, because we don't have any of that right now. But I agree that we need to be looking towards our own currency. We want to be setting our own interest rates, monetary policy, and as Mark mentioned, that helps support government spending, and that's going to be crucial in a very newly independent country. We're going to need a lot of investment, and we don't want to be too closely tied up to someone else's monetary decisions. So ultimately, I think we do need to look at a Welsh currency.
Right. So basically, we sort of agreed that there needs to be a Welsh currency. Mark thinks it needs to be done fairly quickly. Kiera maybe thinks maybe some kind of a buffer zone there to build a thing. I'm just to quickly stay on this. In terms of having currency, you obviously need some kind of bullion. You need some kind of stock behind it. So gold in the past. Whereas there's an abundance of resources, how do you monetize that, or is that something you need to think about?
You don't need bullion. The gold standard left that finished decades and decades. I hate to
But
tell
there's
you
something
this,
so
but
about bringing it back, Mark, isn't it? Because people don't trust what happened in the 70s when everything was let loose.
No, we have fiat currencies now. So basically, they're promises. So they're promises based on the state's ability to pay the money back, and you know the state can't go bust unless it holds currency in other people's currency. So you mentioned Kosovo. So Kosovo dealing in euros. So all of it, if the euro exchange rate changed, but Kosovo's economy had nothing to do with Europe in that particular change that was happening, they'd suffer all the consequences of it. So I think we need to disaggregate ourselves, because our economy, we want to be, and I think we should be, an internationalist economy. We need to build up, you know, trade and relationships more with other countries, particularly England. So we're going to have to hold foreign reserves. But what we don't do is spend, our government shouldn't be spending sterling on what we do. You know, one of the reasons that countries in particularly the global south have gone bust is they've taken money denominated in US dollars. So whatever the Fed does impacts on these countries that have no links to America on an economic basis. So I think the timeliness thing is an interesting one. And I think for me, that talks about us, if we're serious about independence, which the three of us are on this call, we need to start developing that work now, not wait for a date when we're standing in front of the electorate saying, will you support independence or not? We're there and we say, when you support independence, this is what we'll do. So day one, we'll do this. Day two, we'll do this. That's the sort of depth of planning that I think Scotland, I wish they, had they done, I think they may have been in a different place. But we need to be bold enough in the movement, and I think the part, in our case, Kiera and mine, and yours, Siôn, Plaid Cymru need to be developing some of that work and have it there going. We may want to be in government in the Senedd, but ultimately devolution, we're protecting something that is not solving our problems. Yes. We need to move. We need to have the challenges need to be bigger than that, I think.
Yes, I mean, so there's a need there to build the institutions, Kiera. There needs to be a Welsh central bank. What other kind of things do you think we need to build before then, which can be done maybe through devolution of some sort, at least getting those steps ready in place?
Part of it is our skills base as well. I think we're going to need people who have studied finance, who are good at maths, who are invested in Wales personally, who want to be involved in the creation of a bank like that, and who want to be involved in these conversations about currency, because currently, Plaid have conversations about it, but it's not, our work is very Senedd based, and we are a small party. We need big thinkers getting involved in these sort of conversations, and I think it's supporting younger people to have the skills to do that and to be involved in building an independent country. Again, there's questions of where the central bank should be, what that should look like, and do we want everything based in Cardiff and have a sort of London-based finance centre, or do we want to do stuff differently with that as well? How do we spread resource around the country? Do we want it to be independent, or do we want it to be associated with the Welsh government? These questions we need to think about. And I think Mark's right, we don't want to be doing Brexit and trying to plan all this after there's already a referendum taking place. But it's bringing people along for the conversation with us, and it's very sort of high level policy, and we're still trying to get people on board with the idea of independence, let alone getting into these very high level conversations about currency, and it's a long process to make that happen, I think.
Okay, so people like yourself believe, and myself believe, we're economically viable. We've got 15% of Europe's tidal power, all its potential from wind farm, and even solar. Great food-based economy if that was developed as well. But of course, we've got places like Port Talbot, which are closed down, which I'm still tamping about. It makes me so angry. The Welsh Labour Party is so useless, utterly useless and decrepit. They couldn't even put a fight up. But also,
Vaughan flew over to Mumbai though, didn't he? He met the fifth thing. No, he just met nobody.
Yeah.
But he flew over there first class.
Plaid came out with stuff about nationalising whatever about 5-10 years ago. I mean, this has been an ongoing boil which hasn't been sorted, and I I think Tata is also a big part to play for this. They've milked the system. So I think, but what gets me, and I'm maybe to come to something, obviously, for Wales to become independent, there needs a pro-independence party in the Senedd. The biggest one there is Plaid. Greens also supported. But I just feel Plaid has the policies. I think the members in the Senedd are doing a good job, but I think we're still stuck in second gear. And I'm concerned. I'm seeing people on social media, and maybe the social media I'm watching, go on about net zero close for Talbot. And the message for Plaid, the line to take was, if the UK can't save our jobs, then what is the point of the UK? And Plaid isn't making that case. So Plaid is explaining stuff. He's writing articles for the IWA type of thing and voters, but I don't think it's connecting with people in Port Talbot, in Llansamlet, where half my family lived, in Townhill or whatever. And I'm not too sure how that message is going to get across, especially when such a big economic provider in West Glam has closed down, and basically it's just been accepted now. So I don't know, Kiera. I mean, I'm frustrated. I think Plaid are not almost the strongest argument for independence now is the economic argument. I used to believe it was like this, the cultural part, if you like. But I think now the UK is not defending jobs. It's not creating the jobs we need. So why the hell are we still stuck in it? And why the hell isn't Plaid making that clear argument rather than just explaining stuff all the time? Or am I missing something?
No, I'd agree we're very policy heavy. And I think part of that is that we're trying to come up with like a sensible and thought out alternative to Labour, but that doesn't always have a very catchy message that comes across. And we tried to own the Tata narrative. I know Luke Fletcher's been so active down there, and he's had really good like reach on social media and some of the contributions he's had in the Senedd. But yeah, ultimately it's not like we don't have that reach that Reform have. They've got like very catchy messaging. I went into Plasmawr last week to talk to their politics club, and I asked how many of the young people had seen Nigel Farage or Reform on a TikTok, and the whole room's hands go up. You ask about Plaid Cymru or Reen, and it's not quite the same results. We're not getting out there somehow, and that does need to be fixed if we want to be in government in 2026 and if we want Wales to be independent. But I wouldn't say Tata's necessarily the best example of that. I think we did have some decent messaging coming out on it, and I think we're kidding us. Like when I see people say that net zero is the reason that it's shut down, it's so frustrating because Tata are building furnaces elsewhere. This is not about net zero, this is about their profit, and actually the conversation is about companies who haven't got roots here, who will just up and leave, take taxpayer money, and they'll still leave at the end of the day. And actually what we need to be focused on is building a Welsh business base and being able to support ourselves sustainably.
But Reform have won that argument.
Yeah,
that's what people are talking about net zero.
Yeah.
And I don't know what Plaid just say, look, we need another social media expert. Just give us your money. Give us the money for this particular job.
Yeah.
I think I just feel we're still in second place, and we sort of think the policies win. Politics is about being able to blame someone.
Yeah.
So the party which can appropriate.
I disagree, Siôn. I'm gonna. Siôn, I know it's your show. You know, where this goes wrong with politics is what we've lacked for a long time is someone who takes people somewhere else. So what politicians do too far at the moment is they listen to public opinion and they try and fit their narrative to match that public opinion. What we haven't got is anybody going, actually, this is where we're going because that's better, and I'll explain why it's better, but we're going there. I say her name very carefully. Thatcher was probably the last politician in our lifetime who actually went, you don't agree with me at the moment, I'm going to take you on an argument.
Farage is amazing.
Farage did it as well. Farage has done it as well. I accept that. And these two have both done it to the damage of societies and things like that. So we need to start taking people on a journey that goes somewhere else. Because even if you stay where you are at the moment, so you say, let's try and keep these jobs, whether it's Ford, for example. Remember Ford in Bridgend? Welsh government gave them a load of money. Next thing you do, they hopped off. And I was going to say, you did say I could swear, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Anyway, they ran away. They left. They took the money and left. Tata's the same. Tata had taken £500 million of public money, and you know, why aren't we investing that in the community? I've talked for a long time about, so in the Basque Country, you've got the Mondragon run their steelworks. We should be running our steelworks, things like that. We should also green our steel industry in the future, but we should be doing it for our own benefit. At the moment, what we're doing is saying, big company worth billions and billions and billions, let's just give them a little bit more. It's extraction, which is what has happened to Wales forever. You know, you talked about wind, you talked of, you know, we've got all this, we've got the tidal range. Who's going to develop that? Unless we start stepping up, it'll be those from other places extracting the wealth out of it. And the worst thing is they'll be doing it with politicians going, I'm so grateful for you coming here and, you know, giving us these jobs while we take all your money. And the big companies are just going, thank you very much. See you later.
Well, the Labour Party is complicit in literally asset stripping Wales. And Plaid needs to just talk in tabloid language, you know, just spit it out, you know. They need to be pointing fingers and being angry, because people are angry. And they're seeing reform do it. And they're seeing Plaid coming out with more policy documents, which we need. But politics is about who can appropriate blame best. And whoever can appropriate blame best wins. It's just as simple and as horrible as that. And, you know, reform do it, and they're winning votes. You know, and I'm concerned they could be the biggest party. You know, it'd be very tight.
These like tabloid newspapers and so on, they are so much more aligned with reforms. They're happy to, you know, that language they're happy to share.
I need to be tabloid.
They're going to get that in Wales. There's not the media that's behind Plaid Cymru who are happy to parrot that narrative. So it's purely up to us on social media and the channels that do support us to push that.
Plaid also needs to be a mass movement. And why aren't we having rallies for Crown Estate? Something which people actually start to understand, and just on the street. This kind of thing Gwynfor used to do in the 80s when we were on our back. And, you know, that's one way of something which reform can't do or won't do. I actually just don't think they have people on the ground who would actually do stuff. Plaid could be having rallies, you know, to devolve, you know, Crown Estate and HS2. Just march in bloody Merthyr or Port Talbot or Swansea. And even if it's a few hundred, it's getting people on social media then, isn't it? We have to create a mass movement, and thinking we can do it with basically articles for the IWA type things is not going to happen. That's why we're stuck. Plaid is stuck in about 21% of the vote in the Senedd. There's another 15% there to be had, but it's not breaking through at the moment.
I agree, because it gives, like, direct action like that gives people a different way to, like, engage with politics as well. Not everyone wants to come to meetings or go canvassing. Or, you know, voting is the most fulfilling thing to them, and it gets people actively involved. And I know we've been talking about this in Cardiff West a bit, and we've had some involvement from YesCymru people who've been suggesting it as well. And I think it's definitely something we need to do.
I mean, if Plaid get into government and doing the kind of radical things, economic policies, which Plaid has to do, I think, and needs to be done in any case, there's going to be a pushback you know, from the media, from, you know, talking points on radio and stuff like that. So you need to have a mass movement who's got your back, because it's too thin at the moment. And you know, this is the strategic part of it.
But you don't so if you went to where the masses are today, you end up in the same position as you are at the moment. So you have people who believe that the public sector is more inefficient than the private sector. There's no evidence to say that's the case. In fact, if you look at privatized water, I'd say they're much more inefficient than it used to be when it was publicly owned. So there's evidence now that could show the contrary of that. But if we ask people, they'd say that one thing. They'd say that politicians aren't doing a good job. Then they got a point, haven't they? Because, and this is a challenge, I think, for all councillors. And elected members. So one of the things reform do well in is when there's a vacuum. When councillors, MSs, don't go and bother to talk to people and engage with them, it just leaves the door open. So how many of our Plaid Cymru councillors are doing surgeries often? How many of them are putting round leaves? So we just had a big election. We all sat back knackered. Are we doing anything now? Are we going out there? Because if we're not, that's why reform win. If we are, we can beat them. When we looked at our boxes at the general election, the boxes that did the best were ones where Plaid didn't fight. So there were wards in Barry. We were just watching them, and reform were doing really well. And they were where there are lazy councillors doing insufficient work. So changing the narrative involves actually doing some of the stuff that we're paid to do today and getting out there and doing things. That's part of it. I think the other thing, and I just so you can just give me 2 seconds, Kiera. But I think the other thing is, like I say, changing. We can't be where people are at the moment because that's delivering shit. So if we want an independent Wales with 30% child poverty, carry on doing the same economic policies as we're doing now. So we need to take people in a different place and actually beat up some of the, the things that have been pushed down their throats forever that they believe, like the state budget is the same as the household budget. So it's a nonsense, and we need to beat these things back.
So I mean,
Kiera,
do you want to come back on that? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to second the part about boxes. It's the same in Cardiff West, where we didn't go out as much. Reform did better, and in all the other areas that we put a lot of effort into, Reform were 3rd or 4th, and that was the sort of picture across Cardiff West wide as well. So I think we need to go into these areas, and we know where it is in Cardiff West or the valleys, some areas in Swansea and Newport. We know where Reform are going to do well, and we need to be there talking to people there. But I also think part of this about Reform is that they are liars, and Plaid, we write a lot of policy and we want to think things through. I think the IFS found that Reform had lied about their costings in their manifesto to the number of billions. And that's catchy if you can just promise all this stuff. They've not been in an opposition. They've not got many councillors. They've barely got any MPs. So we're not going to be in the habit of just saying stuff to try and win votes, because actually come 2026, if we just say loads of stuff because it's catchy or because that's what people want to hear and then we don't deliver on it, then we're going to have one term in government, and that's going to be it.
Yeah, but this is Reform stick. This is the right-wing populist stick, isn't it?
Yeah.
They say rubbish, and then when it comes, they know they get bailed out by the press or whatever. But the point about where Plaid and presumably other parties weren't active, Reform were picking up votes. But again, to get that happening, we need to have a mass movement to get more Plaid members to go out knocking doors. And we need to get Plaid members who are members already to give more money if they're not knocking doors, and also just to help with stuff. And this is why I don't understand why Plaid isn't thinking about having events on the street, like rallies and public meetings outside, not just in small rooms, to try and get people involved with simple messages like Crown Estate, like HS2, and get people angry. So people blame Westminster, because the problem is Westminster. Westminster is a con. And I remember talking to you about 2 years ago, Mark Hooper, with YesCymru, you sort of had YesCymru, Westminster was a con, it was a bit too strong, but I think it's too weak now. And but this is the kind of simple stuff we need. So Plaid, it's not going to be one with policies or faffing about with press releases, as it says, or fanning about with press releases, as it says in Bridget Jones's Diary, which is one of my favourite films. We need to be out on the streets, and giving people cause to do stuff and getting new members to do that. It's more work, but just tell members we need the money. Just cough up the fucking money, because you can't win without money. People need to understand it, and there are people with money. So, okay, I'm getting on a rant now, but I'm so angry about Port Talbot. I'm so angry because Labour's so fucking useless. Done nothing. So the only argument against independence, Mark Hooper, is that it could be run by the Welsh Labour Party. That is literally the only argument, because they're so useless. They're the epitome of the subaltern class, who are gladly, even to the detriment of their own constituencies, will not do anything. It's absolutely scandalous. They need to be kicked out, like the National Party was kicked out in 1918 in Ireland.
Can I just linking those two things in Labour and Reform? I think sometimes, especially in the English press, people see Reform as taking Tory votes.
Yeah.
My view is that
Labour votes.
They're taking Labour votes primarily in Wales.
Yeah.
And the danger is, I think they've taken Tory votes as well. I'm sure that's the case. But unless you deal with this issue, they then come after Plaid votes. We may not have been in the firing line at the moment, but they'll come after us and they'll eat the votes unless we come up with things that are true alternatives. And in some ways, there's things I agree with you and things I disagree with you on, Siôn. But I think the need to be to have an answer to those people who are really fed up with things not working. They open their windows in the morning, and all they see is potholes and costs and an NHS that's not working and blah. That things don't work. But we need to address the things that don't work.
And this gets me to the next thing, which is And with respect to Kiera, who's a Cardiff West candidate, we need policies which are tuned to people in Pontypridd and Pontarddulais and Pontypool, not Pontcanna. As much as I love Pontcanna, and I do, I go there every down.
But in Barry, we've got town centre seats that we've won that are in the centre of town, that are in, this is, Barry, Siôn, this isn't fancy play, and my ward's quite fancy, but we've won seats in the centre of town and continue to do well and see them as our opportunity. So I think there are spaces we do what you say.
Yes, but I think part of the problem, and maybe it's general problem with the left, is that it's sort of given up on the economic argument, and then identity politics, a lot of other Blairite type things like the 20 mile an hour, and they're not smoking in the car law by Welsh government. People they feel constrained. They don't have enough money. I say the potholes in the streets, things aren't working. And then what they see then is a government saying, you can only do 20 miles an hour. I'm broadly in favour of it. I think it's been rolled out badly. But people are just saying the small things they could sort of enjoy, in inverted commas, has been taken away then by a government which doesn't sort out the big things. So I hope Plaid doesn't try to micromanage people's lives. People have a right to make their own mistakes. And people have a right sometimes.
They don't have the right to kill someone a child doing 30 miles an hour.
I mean, there's also some places where we know, the road is just too. There's been implemented sometimes, I think, just in jobs.
Yeah,
I think that's a symptom of how long Labour have been in power, though. They don't want to do anything radical. They want to sit up there and stay there, and that means they just tweak around the edges. I think they thought 20 mile per hour would be something they could just do quietly. I don't think they expected the pushback. It's very sort of symptomatic of this government with this little niceties they push through, the 5p carry bag charge and so on. And it's I don't think you're not going to see that from a Plaid Cymru government. It's not.
Yeah, and I think we should still keep away from that, because I think maybe if the economy is going well, people say fine, makes sense. I think people are broadly in favour. Even if the Tories are raging against it, I'm sure they all want to keep it in their little village in the Vale or whatever. So I mean, people are in favour in their village or their street, but they want to be doing 17 other people's streets, obviously. This is how people are, unfortunately. But I think because other things, as say here, are not working, it's become a symptom then. Why are you fussing around with this rather than sorting out the bigger problems? So I think you're careful with that.
So you've put it as an either-or argument, Siôn, and I'm not sure it is. I think this could be an and argument. We can do things in a way that is fair, is the right thing to do, isn't disrespectful to people, and we can do things, and but we also need to change the things that aren't working. And I think sometimes if we say, why are you fussing around with, for example, the increase in the size of the Senedd? Well, actually, that talks to, do you want to solve our problems as best we can or not?
Yeah.
So there's a rabbit hole I think we need to be careful of going down. And I think we can do so when we characterize it as just you do that or that, I think you could end up in a very dark place.
Yes, but also you're in government and there's only so much legislation time you have. And do you want to be spending days and months over something which doesn't have a huge impact, maybe, and wherever it may be, and other things which actually do have a big impact on people and actually more structured? Because the problems Wales has is structural. So as Kiera says, 5p bags, that's nice, but that's not the structure. And the problem with 20 miles an hour is because Labour literally voted with the Tories against devolving HS2, Lee Waters didn't have £4 billion to spend on proper stuff. So he's faffing about with 20 miles an hour, which is, I think everyone's sort of supportive of. But it's just frustrating when the big things, your Tata Steels, your lack of railways, lack of new carriages hasn't been sorted. And I think Plaid, if they get into government, need to decide what the important things, the priorities are. And, the micromanaging thing, I think, just needs to be shelved. And just, there's so much stuff we need to be doing.
I think the priority is getting back to basics. So much of the foundational stuff to make a country work we don't have, and whether that's the NHS, our education system, or transport, and making things work to like a normal standard, and then building the economy off that is the priority, I think, for most people. I don't want to get it wrong. I am for the 20 mile per hour thing, but
yeah, well,
there's some other you know, bits that Welsh government do that are just, yeah, they don't seem, I feel like they're out of touch. I feel like they're out of touch and they're too comfortable, and that's why these things happen.
Yeah, and I think Plaid need to be quite ready to call those things out, because I think this again drives into a lot of reform voters, that people feel, you know, their life is a bit rubbish, and then they've got those politicians telling them what to do all the time, and they're not getting any added value from their life from that. Okay, just go into the government. So let's take an argument. Plaid is in some kind of coalition, I presume, in government. What kind of thing to sort out the economy? Because I think if the Senedd isn't performing well, there's no chance for independence. I say the biggest argument against independence is Welsh Labour. That is the biggest problem. With Scotland, they had a fairly good SNP, and things seem to be dodgy the last few years, but that seemed to be certainly up to 2014, be bringing in some exciting and radical policies, and people, okay, we can get more of this. So, Kiera, what do you think, you know, the kind of things Plaid need to be working on to get the structural change Wales needs to have a more affluent and, you know, a more prosperous country for us all?
I think obviously maybe with my background for working with the Federation of Small Businesses, but I think supporting a Welsh domestic business base is just going to be key. It makes us not reliant on elsewhere. We have the economic levers to be able to do part of that with DBW, better resourcing, DBW.
What's that?
Oh, the Development Bank of Wales, sorry. And then, you know, improving support from Business Wales or whatever, creating business infrastructure that supports our local businesses. And I think that's going to be crucial. And then skills is going to be another huge thing. So many people I know have left because there's not the opportunities here. They go to university elsewhere, they don't come back. Having job, like a pathway, and this is something Luke Fletcher's been talking about loads with the skills audit. So we know what jobs are available and we train up our young people to go into those jobs. That's a lever we have. We can do that instantly in 2026, and it starts feeding the businesses that are here and keeping our young people in the country and growing the economy that way. And I think those are the two key things I'd say from the get-go in 2026 for a pathway to have more control over economic levers eventually.
Well, yeah, at the moment, the Welsh government is literally financing the brain drain. You know, it's literally telling people to leave Wales to study. You know, I got two kids, one in Manchester, one in Liverpool in university. People make their own choices for loads of different reasons. So you can't stop that. You wouldn't want to stop that. There's almost a whole system is geared to telling people, if you're staying in Wales, you're a loser.
Yeah,
I think that's basically the message, because I think basically that's how Labour think. Labour do think that staying in Wales is a loser. It's okay when you come back or buy second hold or something, but you know, there's a lack of.
Oops, sorry, go on.
No, well, so I think we need to, you know, we got the Senedd system, which is literally pumping people out of Wales, and then people, Labour Party turn around and say we've got a shortage of teachers. For the English sector, it's not a problem. You know, when I was born in Zambia, my parents went there to teach in Zambia because we became independent. You know, in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, you'll have teachers from Zambia coming back to Wales. So there will be a problem getting teachers in English language system. There will be in the Welsh language, and we literally have a Labour government is literally telling people leave, and with no way of just enticing them back. And people often want to leave for loads of different reasons. We all support that. I do that as a father. But this is so important
to do so, though. Like currently, we know people are more likely to stay where they go to university. If you
I've done that.
Yeah. And I went to London for university, and it was just the way I minded that I wanted to come back. But you get more, or I got more funding to study in London, so we're paying people to leave, which is. I know. It doesn't.
What's the Welsh Labourism? There's the only argument against independence is Welsh Labour. Is a total subaltern party. Should be, you know, studied and quoted in all these post-colonial discussions.
We need to incentivize people to come back, really. We want people to have opportunity. We want them to bring expertise from elsewhere and ideas from elsewhere, but we need to make sure that we pull them back, and they want to work here, and there's opportunity for them here, and currently that isn't the situation.
I also need to tell them, we want you to come back, you know, have a good time, do different stuff, find yourself. But we genuinely want you to come back. I think every other country is doing that in Eastern Europe. And our demographic profile is exactly the same as Eastern Europe here, if you look at the reality of it. So, Mark, you know, you're there in government or running it behind us, pulling the strings in 2026 or whatever. What are things you think Plaid in some kind of Christian one Vex guesses needs to be prioritising in terms of policies to get to structural change Wales needs, and also with an eye on independence.
So I think that eye on independence is really important. I'm going to take one step back. I think we need to be, as a party, working towards being the lead partner in any coalition. So we take the key offices.
Yeah.
So I think we can and we should be looking at a First Minister coming from Plaid. I think Rhyn should be First Minister of Wales in 2026. And we need to believe that's possible and start working in communities that we haven't worked before. So the conversation you just challenged us by needs to be addressed, and we need to be in those communities, because everyone's a winner. Everyone's winnable now. We could actually start winning these seats. And if it's the challenge then in someone like the Vale of Glamorgan and Bridgend, we're likely to get one seat by default.
How many?
That was 6.
Right.
We should, if we want to be leading the government, we need 2 seats in the Vale and Bridgend. The Cardiff seats, we need to start. We all know we've been weaker in those places than we've been in the past. Now, there's some reasons for that, but we need to start to address them. That's the first. Then when we get into if we're then running the economy department and got those levers that Kiera was talking about, there's one word that I think it goes through all of the stuff. It links into the stuff that Kiera's talking about, and it's all about ownership. So if you allow the ownership, so the ownership of profits to go elsewhere, they'll go elsewhere. If you allow the ownership of businesses to be owned, by other people, that's what will happen, and the profits will go. So how do we start to change that? A lot of that's about making sure that you support the small businesses, but you also build up cooperatives that people can work together. Let's start to, and there's lots of evidence, that I've mentioned the Basque Country once today as well, about how they managed to keep the things together. But the other thing, and I think this is based on my experience of working in government, is that we've copied the civil service way of doing things from the UK. So the culture of the civil service is protective of the state. And we've got a fledgling polity in Wales. It's new. Everything's new. What we don't need is a protective civil service. We need a civil service that's actually prepared to take on the big challenges ahead of us. And we need them to be saying, instead of it being, let me see how I can protect you, Minister, it should be saying, this is how I'm going to solve these big problems, so that we look back.
I don't know why Plaid isn't back in civil service. The people there, they're heads of departments, they don't even live in Wales. They're not even paying taxes here. It's just a career. But why aren't we just attacking them? Every other party does this. They need to be on their toes. They need to be a little bit afraid of Plaid, because it's not an easy life. There are good people there, of course, and people will just want to do a good job for their own self-respect and for the country. There are people there who are just, and I've had this respect, with the .Cymru, which is a big problem, just to get a URL, TR, top-level domain for Wales. It's like having an argument, do you want a national flag? This is absolutely crazy. Or do you want a national anthem for your country? And we had to haggle through the civil service for years. And Carwyn Jones said that he didn't want it, because those messages get from the civil service. This is the kind of people we're up against. Why don't Plaid just say there's a problem with the civil service? A lot of them are institutionally anti-Welsh. Because institutionally anti-Welsh. Just say it.
So I think the answer...
Start talking very plainly, because people are not listening to articles in the IWA magazine.
No, but I think you need to do it in a way that talk about the culture of the civil service needs to change. Yeah. I don't think this is about people. I think this is about leadership primarily, and it's about having at the very top of the civil service people saying, actually, we are here to serve the people of Wales, not just the whims of those politicians as they come through, and see this as an opportunity to change some of the key things. Because we have got powers in the Senedd, but I think you also need to make sure that whatever you do now doesn't disrupt what we want to do in an independent Wales as well. How do we make these things as building blocks to a future? And there's a number of things in there, but ownership. I think that's, if there's one thing, that's what we need to change. And then we'll never have a conversation with Tartar like we've just failed to have now, because we're just, we're party to, Wales is party to, admittedly by a Vaughan, Gethin and others, to what is frankly a swindle. They're just looking at us and laughing.
Yeah, they are. I mean, Kiera, it's Plaid, again, this is mine. It's Plaid hard enough. I'm just Plaid is full of very nice people. Yeah, and I'm from that kind of background. I'm saying a nice, people don't like confrontation. People are not street fighters like Mark Hooper. People who are used to losing essentially, and then try to see the bright side of losing. Say, oh, it's not so bad. We got something out of it, and because this has been the Welsh reality of the last 700 years. Essentially trying to say, well, it's not too bad. At least our language isn't as bad as the Breton languages type of thing. Or at least we're better off than someone else. And I'm concerned that Plaid, that is so ingrained into Plaid thinking that I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think we're hard enough. I don't think we're hard. If we got into government, we'd bow down to please someone, to trying to be nice and having that pat on the back saying, oh, that Mark Hooper, he's a nice bloke, isn't he? That's more important to Plaid than saying, no, God, I don't like the Mark Hooper, but I've got to do this work. Am I right here? Or is it just something you...
So there's many people who would agree with you. My partner's inclined that way. I think he finds it frustrating.
Listen to your partner then.
Yeah, but I don't know. There's definitely areas that we could improve on, but I would not say we're necessarily not going hard enough. I think we're in a transitionary period right now where we are, as Mark said, we need to change the way we speak about things. And it's not, if we're in a coalition, it's actually when Reen is First Minister in 2026. And that's the sort of language we've started using. And that's what we are talking to people and getting that message across. And that's what we did at least in Cardiff West in 2024. It was, we are the only people who can beat Labour here. So it's anyone else is not worth voting for. And I think it's building up a culture across Wales of using that language when talking about Plaid. I was in Swansea on the weekend and I spoke to someone and he said he's a really strong Welsh nationalist, but he voted Reform, and I was so confused as to how. And he said, oh, but Plaid is such a small party, there was no point voting for them. And I was like, but Reform are a really small party. So I think there's messaging there. But I think we're all responsible and how we speak about it, and we need to have that push harder and when we speak about it. But yeah, I think we're getting
yes, but I think my concern is that Plaid is in government, but we'll bow down. People are going to be against us. The British system is going to be against us. The press will be sort of indifferent, but also maybe coming from a position with this isn't possible, maybe not particularly hostile. There will be elements of civil servants that just don't want change. Some of them, I think, are institutionally anti-Welsh. Some of it is just, I want an easy life. There's not enough civil servants. I'm not just kicking people for the sake of it. But, we need to be tough. We need to be used to be having people hate us at times, but also we need to be open to seeing, wise enough to seeing where we need to maybe compromise or change or something. I'm not too sure if the party and it's almost a movement, because we've been a minority movement for 100 years. And we've been a minoritized nation for 700 years, where we're so used to accommodating, as Michael Sheen says. I don't know if we need to get out of that mindset, I think. I think part of the Reform appeal, I think, to like the person who met in Swansea, was like they just feel Reform is going to fight. And they're the awkward squad. And they don't want to feel someone's going to fight for them. I remember canvassing, I was stood in Pembrokeshire in 2001. And David Wigley came down to help in Haverfordwest and everywhere. And people were coming out to the shops to meet David Wigley. I couldn't believe it. But the appeal of David Wigley was people felt he would fight for them. If there's a fire in the building, you want someone to follow. And David Wigley is the person who'd follow to get out of the building. And I think there's an element of that we need to have that kind of appeal with Plaid, that if something's not wrong, they're going to fight for us. And that needs to be shown to people like your friend in Swansea, who they're not listening to particular policies. They just want someone who they feel fights for them.
Yeah. I think we're getting there. I think Reen was good in the election. I think there's a lot to go, and I hear what you're saying, but I don't think that we're destined to that fate. I think that is in the process of changing, but we have been hit down for years and we have lost in many elections. So it's a new territory for us where
I think it's a national psyche as well. And I think it's partly explains how useless Labour is, that they just don't expect to do anything. They expect us to have crumbs. And that is the mentality of a conquered nation. So Mark Hooper, just the 3 or 4 things which Plaid have to do, because you can't deliver everything. Events happen. There could be another crash or something halfway through, whatever. So the 3 or 4 main things Plaid has to do if it's in government, and also with an eye on independence. So look, what kind of policies we're looking for, what kind of things we need to do.
So I think I mentioned one at the start. So it's about how do you build an economy that's got ownership that's central to what we're doing. I think we need to define the society we're aiming for. So I think this is taking us 3 or 4 terms away. So I think we're into a 4-year term as well. So the actuality of delivering in government will be limited to 4 years. So you need to set a vision that takes us beyond those 4 years. But I think let's go back. We need to win. You said, are we tough enough? We need to start winning those battles now. I was in Gibbons down in Barry, which is it's an estate. Well, I walked around there delivering leaflets the other day, and I thought these people don't even have councillors. They can't do, because the neglect on some of those areas where they would just, if it happened in my ward, the people would have run up. But if they hadn't, I would have seen it and got people to deal with some of the stuff that was there. Anyway, this one guy popped this leaflet through the door. He had on his door frame, it said, "Please don't put any leaflets through this door thing," but I put it through. And he came out and he went, "What are you doing putting a leaflet through my door?" And I said, "Well, I'm from Plaid, and this is we want to talk to you about the things that you care about." He said, "Whoa. He said, I said, "I bet you're fed up with politicians." I went, yeah, I'm fed up with politicians. I said, "I bet you're fed up because they never come round apart from at election time." He went, "Yeah." And I went,
"Goodbye."
He said, "What's your name?" I said, "Mark." He said, "I'm Kerry." He shook my hand, took my leaflet, and has replied to the survey. So we can do these things, but we need to be a bit more robust and not just go, "Oh, I'm sorry I posted that letter. I put that leaflet through your door because I care about your concerns that you're going to tell me about. And I may not be able to solve them all at once, but I'm not going to back down and let you just tell me you're not interested, because all the other people won't come around." Reform will drop no personal leaflets round in the election, because the people who are their members don't have the capacity. We've got to get honesty for sure. I think your point's right. I agree with both of you. I think we've been too weak in dealing with some of these things in the past, but I agree with Kiera insofar as we're moving on a bit now, and I think I get the feel this is the best election chance we've got. Labour are going to be in absolute chaos when it comes to 26. The Tories are still defeated. I think people like the Lib Dems and the Greens are going to get squeezed out, because in most places they won't hit the threshold to get 1 seat. So our job is to squeeze that vote even tighter in some of these places. So the people we need to beat, let's go after reform, because if you're a reform voter, so they're not all racists. These are people who are angry,
Yeah.
So let's not demonize them just for voting.
No, not.
Let's go and make us the people who can deal with it. But again, I think we can be angry, but we also need to offer solutions. If we don't offer solutions, then we're just a husk like the rest of them.
So the solution, back to the original question, Mark Hooper, although I like to answer. What are 3 or 4 things which Plaid need to be doing in our first government? I can do, obviously.
Have I not tried to answer them yet?
No, I want the specific things. Are you going to get rid of Seren or reform that? Are you going to build a railway line somewhere? Are you going to build a new hospital or close a hospital, or reform something in hospitals or something? What kind of doable policies which Plaid government could be doing in the first government? Prioritising.
I'm going to say the same thing that starts out. So ownership, and all of those things. I think so. The things that Kiera's already mentioned 3 or 4. This is about how do you make sure that the tools we've got in our hand, Development Bank of Wales to support ownership of our assets and keeping businesses there. You take Germany. Germany has what's called a Mittelstand, which is this group of companies that are mid-sized companies that stay there. The sorts of things that Rachel's Dairies could have been had it not been bought up by a European, I think it was an Irish company. So how would you start to keep those things more locally? And then you don't get places being closed down and things like that. But I also think we need to be clear so that the Welsh NHS it's the same as everywhere else in the UK. If you know, the NHS is a broken thing, whether it's in Scotland, England, the north of Ireland, or in Wales. We have the thing is broken. We need to start having a really honest conversation about how we build a health service, rather than a sickness service. And part of that is by making sure that we we get scared. So the right-wing press beats us too easily because we cow too easily, too quickly against things. So postcode lottery. So if there are things that we need to be doing in our health service that are different than they are in the rest of the UK, then that's fair enough, because we've got a population that's older, sicker, and different, frankly, than other places. So if we have longer waiting lists for thing A, but we're solving thing Z, and thing Z is the important thing for things in our country, then we need to be doing things like that. So these are, frankly, quite tough decisions, but we need to battle them out. We need to say the reason that you're having to wait longer for that is because we're spending our money on this. I think social care is a critical thing. Why do we, in Wales and elsewhere, treat people who are most vulnerable at the latter, after they've been through a life of that they've been through? Why do we allow them to be treated so badly? These are the opportunities to create a difference. But it's 4 years, so this needs to be. I honestly think we need to start. So manifestos are all well and good, and we're very good. And Kiera mentioned earlier, they criticised the Reform manifesto for making it up. Our manifesto went down quite well for the general election. They couldn't find many holes in it. They all tried, but it wasn't particularly beaten up. But I think we need to be starting to draw a vision for the next 15, 16 years. So we need to be looking at multi-terms. This is what we're going to do. This is the way Wales is going to be. And that document, I think, needs to start saying the reason this needs to change is because the UK is broken. So we start to build the building blocks that say, if you want this to change, if we want to, for example, never have a child in poverty, we can't stick with these idiots next door. It isn't going to work.
I think that'd be a very strong message as well, because I think wherever part of the spectrum you are, you do feel the UK isn't working, and probably can just say that we need to get out of this. So, Kiera, I mean, I would be getting rid of. I don't want to go too much into policy, but just quickly on this: why are we paying agencies to look after teaching and nursing and stuff? The waste. It's a business. Fine, they found a business model work. I support. I run a business, and it's bloody hard. So I've got a lot of respect for anyone who runs a business, but why are we paying these, which obviously have a 30% profit or 25% profit on any bill? So would Plaid be looking to get rid of things like that?
I hope so. Health is not my expertise area, but I wrote that down actually. I was just thinking whilst Mark was speaking about what my sort of 3 areas would be that I hope to see. And yeah, social care, as Mark said, it's a flagship policy of Plaid's, but having a health and social care system that's free at the point of use, promoting preventative healthcare measures, and then also I think we need to remove private profit, such as agency staff, from our NHS. It's inefficient, it's costly, they don't know the hospitals they're working in. It basically erodes the point of the NHS. So having that in there, it will be a difficult transitionary period, but getting rid of the staff, but ultimately I think it needs to happen. I think we need to look at educational reforms, as I mentioned, and one of Luke's ideas of the skills audit, changing the curriculum, making sure that works. And I think moving towards vocational qualifications is key, supporting the industries we do have here and pushing people into industries we want to grow. And then, yeah, as Mark said, on the economy is ownership. I think that's really crucial. We need to look at owning our own businesses and not being reliant on multinational corporations, and owning the capital that's here.
Yeah, and I think those are great. Plaid has the policies, and I think Rhys had a very good election. He was, well, you always felt confident. You always felt relaxed, which is always good. So he's a very good communicator. He can keep on message, and Plaid managed to get some couple of main points over time after time. So I think that's the first time that sort of happened with Plaid. And I think if Plaid is doing quite well, then I think the whole discussion around is independence viable becomes something which people are thinking actually it's worth engaging with, because this can actually happen. I think we've been talking about for an hour now, haven't we, Mark Hooper? I told you it would be about an hour. So I think we're going to we'll tone it down just a little bit now. So I'd like to know a bit more about you. We are Welsh. I'm nosy. My first question is, where are you from? Because I just like to know these things. So start with you, Kiera. I know from the election you're Swansea girl from Town Hill, which is a big council estate in Swansea. People outside maybe don't know about it. Is that where Twin Town was based? Is that the Twin Town film?
Yeah, sort of into Mount Pleasant, Twin Town is.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So okay. Okay, well, just tell us a bit about yourself.
Yep. So yeah, my mum is how I got into Welsh independence, if we're going to talk about that. She is English, she's from Reading, and she came here to Swansea Uni, never left. And she's always been like a very like community activist sort of person, and she came here and saw the sort of injustice, and she got involved with YesCymru in Swansea. So then there was no activists in Town Hill there when we were growing up. I actually looked at standing for council. I've applied at one point, and we were the only Plaid members in the whole of Town Hill. So she used to drag me around leafleting in Town Hill when I was younger, and then I got involved sort of that way, went to the meetings with YesCymru, and then I went to college then, and Beth and Saeed came into my college. She was talking about largely
So which college did you go to?
Gower College, Swansea.
Oh, yeah, so sixth form college in
And I studied economics and politics and maths, so that was always my interest anyway. And she was talking a lot about monarchy, anti-monarchy stuff, and republicanism, and that's how I got involved with Plaid then. And then I went to the London School of Economics, studied economics and government there, and got involved with the Welsh Society there. We did some talks, got Beth and Saeed and Carwyn Jones in to talk, and I made the Welsh Society really political, which some people didn't like. Normally it's just watching rugby. And then came back and started working for Plaid, basically. Went to FSB for a bit. Wasn't for me because I missed being party political. And yeah, I came back here. So very political upbringing, and that's my sort of short biography.
So you're working in the Senedd with Plaid as a researcher, you said, isn't it?
Yeah. I cover economy, transport, and local government. But economy is my.
Then you live in Cardiff, and you stood in Cardiff, and you live in Cardiff West, which is sort of.
I live in Cardiff West. Yeah, I've lived in Cardiff the last 4 years since I worked for Plaid. Basically, I've lived in Cardiff.
So good. Well, and will you be standing again, Kiera?
I'm thinking about putting my hat in, yeah.
Putting you on a spot.
I'll try, yeah. But we'll see.
But just quickly, just stick on that. So your experience, obviously, was standing. Well, I stood for Cardiff North in 2001, and that was a very different kind of experience. I think there's 8 of us helping me canvass, including 2 of them who are related to by blood. So you seem to have quite a bouncy and good election. You're lucky in inverted commas that the Labour candidate just parachuted in. It is Cardiff West is probably the most politically active Labour group as well, so that people actually, I think, do discuss policies in a way maybe other branches, constituencies don't to the same extent. So what was your, how do you reflect on the election campaign in general?
Shortly on that sort of Labour issue, I think it feeds into issues we were talking about of comfortableness with the Welsh Labour government, but I can't believe how comfortable they must have felt to have done that in Cardiff West, because it's got a very active Labour Party there, and it's a very, in lots of areas, Punkhana, Canton, it's a very political, liberal area. So it's quite shocking that was allowed to happen. But yeah, I enjoyed the campaign, which I think helped. I love politics. It's like a hobby and my job. So I took time off work to make sure I did it well, and I didn't want to sort of be a paper candidate. I wanted to be out 2 times a day doing it. And I think part of what went well for me was I've always enjoyed using social media. Like I've done like music videos on there before, and I've done makeup videos. So I've put stuff out on social media, and I've ran social media channels for university societies. And we were having people come out canvassing with me who just found me on social media, and it was young people, so they had energy, and they'd come and stay out for 4 or 5 hours a day, split in 2 and stuff like that. And I think that was just it built momentum throughout the campaign then, because we could do more and more and more, put more out on social media, and I think it sort of bubbled like that, really.
Yeah, well, and I think that's one reason I heard about you was through, well, I'm being from Cardiff, so taking a special interest, obviously, in Cardiff candidates. But the social media presence was there to be seen.
Yeah.
So you're basically from a pro-Plaid independence, YesCymru background, and it sort of became natural then. So, Mark Hooper, have you done any makeup videos as well? You haven't, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So, Mark, tell us about your journey to independence and or Plaid and YesCymru and stuff like that.
I will, but I just want to just say that Kiera's campaign, you know, my cousin, my nephew, was one of the people who helped Kiera, and just you get to realise that it's built up quite a campaign team and quite it's about energy sometimes, and I think that energy shone through, and that it requires leadership. So I think did exceptionally well there. So I think that's and I think you should definitely stand again if you want any persuasion in that. I think the Senedd in 26 needs you there, Kiera. So stand. The funny thing is, Kiera knows the person who asked me a question that got me interested in independence. So a guy called Mike Scott, who knows Kiera's mum and dad, and I think your mum works in Mike's office at the moment. So small world.
People, yeah. Good.
Yeah. So, and this is about the long car ride. So we were traveling up to the north one day with IndyQ, and he was driving.
That's what IndyQ is, Mark Hooper. Not everyone knows.
So IndyQ was a co-working. It still is. It's a co-working space, and it's a cooperative.
Which you founded.
Which I founded, and then we were all around Wales. We decided to go to England. Big mistake. But apart from Yorkshire, they were interested. But anyway, we were driving up to the north, and we got, I think, just past Swansea. And Mike said to me, "What's your view on independence?" And I went, "We're too poor, too small, too stupid. We can't." And he went, "I'm really surprised at that." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you normally question these things quite deep." And it was that, and I'm not. That it was that somebody saying, "Why do you believe the shit that you've been told all your life sometimes?" And when someone challenges you like that, it just makes you go. And we spent the next 4 hours, because it's really not an easy drive. And by the end, it has started that question. And I think the challenge of independence is like it's like a greasy slope. Once you start challenging it, you don't go back. I can't see any way that I can come to the conclusion that staying in the UK is better for solving the problems we've got than trying to solve them ourselves. So you just start on that, and you're just like, okay, I'm all.
Were you from a political background, Mark, or what was your? Were you a voter and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, I was a member of the Lib Dems and stood in the Vale for the Assembly as was, and also for Parliament. Like Kiera mentioned before, politics is a bit of a hobby. If I was a good footballer, I'd like to say, if you play football and you can, I wouldn't play for Swansea, but if you were, capable, it's like you're doing the job you love, and I think that politics is one of those things you need to really love to want to change things, and that's what I'm keen to do. So I find it a fascinating thing, and it's just, we've said it a couple of times before. This is the chance now to change. We will not have a Labour First Minister in 2026 if we get our act together now.
Yeah.
And that is a change that is monumental. To have leadership of the government by a non-Labour politician is incredible. And the stars are aligned. We just got to get our backsides into gear and get there. And that's the first step, I think, to independence as well, because then we can start to put our ideas into action. So it's, this is, I don't want to sort of put old Treen, he's got it all on his show. But,
Put Treen is now having a meltdown, sure, partly things I'm saying, but also, the pressure, no pressure, Treen, you're expected to be, to deliver on this. But I think, if people are just half serious about independence, you cannot vote Labour again. You literally can't. Had Labour devolved HS2 and Crown Estate and policing, I say fine. There's an argument there, and I wouldn't begrudge someone for family and cultural reasons, just feel like I'm safe. I feel safer in this moment. I understand that. My dad was offered to stand for Labour in Cardiff, British Cabalva Ward, 1980s, and he was from a Labour background. His father was a union rep. He decided not to. Sometimes maybe he should have done that, and maybe he would have been a good, diligent councillor, and he could have done some good. But he decided, I don't believe it. But I mean, you sometimes have to just. You cannot now vote Labour and say you support independence or even devolution.
But there's nowhere to hide anymore, is there? So you've got Labour in Westminster, Labour in the Senedd. In the Vale, we've got Labour, and the same with Cardiff. Labour are running the council. They always used to blame somebody else. Yeah. It's on them. Everything's on them.
Yeah. Well, it used to be the anti-Tory jingoism, wasn't it? And they can't do that. And I think we really just need to. The people cannot vote Labour anymore if they. And I think there's something to be said for Plaid, saying this is the election to devolve the Crown Estate. Yeah. Give us a mandate to devolve. So basically, and I think this kind of thing would appeal to those wavering reform voters, people who are Labour looking to, vote for Plaid to devolve the Crown Estate. We have a mandate then from the people to demand it. And why not play politics like that? It's a nice, simple thing. People understand. And everyone knows that Wales is energy rich. This is one thing everyone knows about, and the water and rain and stuff. So play that kind of politics. It's been a fantastic discussion. There's more we can say, but we've probably been an hour and a quarter. Kiera and Mark can be very good putting up with my various rants and stuff. I appreciate this. It's all, we're all in therapy here. But I think the frustration is, as you say, Mark, the stars are aligned. And I think also we don't have more time to waste. We were wasted 700 years. We wasted the last 100 years in this stupid union. I know I was in Ireland last week for a Wikipedia conference in Waterford, and then I went to Dungarvan. The roads are amazing, which is surprising if you live in bloody Ceredigion, but the towns are busy. Now, I don't for a minute say there must be poor places and problems in Ireland. I know that. But I was there in the 1980s, and it's just totally transformed. And not just the economy, the people as well. When we were growing up, Mark, people were making jokes, literally jokes with Irish people, because they could, because Ireland was a basket case. And in our lifetime, Wales has, and I know people don't like this, but the GDP of Wales was double the size of Ireland. Now it's 4 times smaller. And you can see that. And we've wasted 25 years devolution has been wasted by Labour. 100 years. I've been in countries which I saw becoming independent. Slovenia, former communist countries, hyperinflation, domestic markets collapsed, wars literally on the doorstep, and they're now overtaking us. So Westminster to work in, and I wish Plaid people, when they do ask the question about independence, don't start the answer with, well, we don't want it now. Make the case for it. Because every time someone goes and asks Plaid candidates, do you want independence? And say, well, yes, but not now. They've basically killed the idea. Use that time to say we're 15% of Europe's tidal power. Make the case to say that Ireland's now 4 times richer than us when it used to be half as poor of us. Don't waste those 10 seconds, those 30 words, apologising. Right, Kiera Marshall, pleser I gwrdd â ti, a gret bod ni bod yn siarad yn Gymraeg ar social media cael ti yma, so pob lwc da hwnna. Byddai'n siarad Cymraeg da ti now, Kiera, trwy'r amser. I'll always be speaking to you in Welsh. You can run, but you can't hide. And if you don't know the Welsh word, just say the English word and carry on. Nobody's died. It's okay. This mutation isn't a problem. It's not a hanging offence. Mark, as usual, thanks for making time. I regularly phone Mark Hooper for the rant, and he sets me aside with some words of wisdom. So I'm always glad to have a chat with him. But I think we've thrust out a lot of good things tonight. I think sorted out independence, we can afford it. I think the arguments should be discussing, our own currency. I think we need to look at that and explain that why that needs to happen and how, what that actually means. The kind of threat we need to be, how we need to be handling from reform, which people vote for loads of different reasons. And there's one thing which disappointing in the election was that there's a chunk of Labour people, rather than going to Plaid, were going to reform. And we need to sort that out. I think we discussed the kind of things we need to prioritising if we're in government, how to win those votes. And I think it's good always to hear from Kiera and Mark about, their journey to independence or how they're supporting it. That's so good to hear, because we are building up a movement here through YesCymru and hopefully through Plaid Cymru to go for independence, because Wales deserves better. This isn't as good as it gets, and within Westminster isn't working for us. It is a con. Right, you've been listening to me, Siôn Jobbins from Radio YesCymru, on your favourite podcast, and also the YesCymru YouTube. We're on Twitter. Is Twitter dying? It seems to be. It may be worth just leaving it now. Twitter, Facebook, and we're now on the YesCymru Instagram. So yeah, Radio YesCymru is trying to be cool and hip, Mark, but we need to get Kiera Marshall in to really show us how it's done. I need to get on TikTok, but I've told my kids I'm not going on TikTok, so there's someplace where the old man isn't on social media with them. So I'm giving them some space, but I think we need to be on TikTok. So Radio YesCymru, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. And there's loads of previous talks on the Radio YesCymru podcast. I think Mark Hooper's been on a couple of times, and I'm sure he'll be on in the future as well. So tan tro nesa, till next time, you've been listening to Radio YesCymru. Thanks for your time. And Kiera Marshall, diolch yn fawr I ti, Mark Hooper, diolch yn fawr I ti hefyd. Thanks for your time. It's been great speaking to you.
Ta-ra.